No coronavirus briefing from the president today, but he did speak earlier on the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program, and he's taking some action when it comes to the meat and airline industries. NBC News correspondent Hans Nichols is with me now. And Hans, let's start with those comments from the president a little after 3 o'clock today, which I so rudely cut you off to go to. What did he have to say there?
Well, we heard from the president twice today. Initially, he teased out this idea that he would be doing something for the meatpacking industry, something for the food supply chain, and he's indicated he wants to shield them from liability. He elaborated a little bit in his 3 o'clock appearance before the press. I don't want to call it briefing, but he did take some questions. And it seems like they're still working out. This is going to be an executive order. Whether or not he uses the Defense Production Act is still slightly unclear. There's some reporting on that earlier. But he does want to give them liability to ensure the reliability of the food supply, because you look what a lot of specifically senators from agricultural states are saying, and they are concerned about what's happening out there, especially with the meat supply and what that can mean for people's refrigerators around the country. So that's the president's most recent action on this. And then he's touting the PPP, what the Small Business Administration is doing, saying that they have a surge of new loans and they're really processing more than they have in the past. But remember, that led to the infrastructure and the system shutting down last time and having some problems. So we'll see how smoothly this second tranche gets rolled out. Allison?
Hans, I know he also got into testing today at that press briefing, if you will. What did the president have to say there?
So there have been a lot of different estimates about what's required for testing. Last night, the president said that he'd get 2% of every state. Some public health officials, some are even saying that you need to have 50 million or 50% of the population tested almost on a weekly basis. Our own Kristen Welker pressed the president on whether or not they could end up doing 5 million tests a day, and have a listen. But the president seemed to suggest they'd be there relatively soon.
You're confident you can surpass 5 million tests per day? Is that?
Oh, well, we're going to be there very soon. If you look at the numbers, it could be that we're getting very close. I mean, I don't have the exact numbers.
So that doesn't quite comport with the numbers that we're getting. Overall, the country has, throughout the beginning of this entire pandemic, you're at about a little over 5 million tests to date. Right now, daily testing is hovering somewhere north of 200,000. There have been some indications that could be doubling. And then yesterday, the president suggested that they would go far beyond doubling. But no one in the administration, before that question from Kristen Welker, has talked about 5 million national tests per day. So we'll see if the president sticks by that, or whether or not he claims that was sarcastic, or he didn't understand that the question was on a daily basis. Allison?
Hans, the president also talking about testing airline passengers for coronavirus. What was he saying about that?
So this came up earlier with Governor DeSantis, the governor of Florida. And the idea is that you would give someone one of these quick rapid response tests. There's one from Abbott they seem to be mentioning that can test someone in 15 minutes. Now, they haven't formalized this. DeSantis floated it. The president seemed to suggest that that was interesting. But that is the way it seems. And again, they're just sort of hinting at this might work, is that before you get on a flight, because remember, flights are overall airlines at about 95% less capacity than normal, you would have to take one of these tests, and then presumably you would only be allowed on if you tested negative, if you didn't have COVID-19. So there's this saliva test that a lot of administration officials are talking about coming out of Rutgers. There's the Abbott test that they've talked about now almost for a good 4 or 5 weeks. So they haven't been terribly specific on what kind of test and who would administer it. But DeSantis at least open to the idea, and the president is apparently as well. Allison?
Hans, the Washington Post reporting this week that the president's intelligence briefing book repeatedly cited threats of the coronavirus back in January and February. The president took a question about that today.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's always a question of what's in the briefing book and what's actually briefed. And the president is sort of danced around this in the past. He claims he has this great memory. The fundamental question is, how singular was the voice to the president on saying that he needs to take action now? We know that he had that conversation with Alex Azar in the end of January. We know that conversations even throughout the month of February were clearly warning this. We also know that throughout the month of February, public health officials and public reporting, open source reporting, indicated that this would be a serious problem. So We'll see whether or not the president modifies his response. They are disputing, at least some officials are disputing the level of intelligence that was included in these presidential daily briefings, which, of course, are classified. And so one of the challenges for the White House here is going to be how to refute this story without divulging classified information. Allison?
All right, Hans Nichols, thank you so much. You're very gracious to come back and join us again after I had to cut you off earlier. Thank you.
Anytime.
Georgia's governor defending his decision to reopen some businesses in the state. He's gotten a lot of flack from President Trump and local leaders who say it's too early. NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander joins me now from Marietta, Georgia, which is just outside Atlanta. Blaine, at that press conference, you asked the governor and the commissioner of public health about the data they used to decide when to reopen. What did they tell you?
Well, let me just set that up a little bit for you, Allison. You know, the premise of the question essentially is that Georgia, along with a number of other states that are lifting their restrictions, do not meet those guidelines, those recommended guidelines that were set forth by the White House that recommend 2 weeks of declining cases when it comes to COVID-19. Georgia does not meet that threshold. So I asked the governor yesterday when he talks about facing criticism from President Trump, from mayors around the state, and not meeting that threshold, to point us to specifically what data he did use to determine that this was the best and safest choice for the state of Georgia. Here's how he responded.
We're moving forward with data and information and decisions from the local public health officials, meeting and working within the guidelines of the great plan that the president has laid out.
But, sir, if I could follow up specifically what numbers on the health department website.
Well, we're glad to, I'll get my press team. We're glad to share all the numbers and the data that we have available that supports the decision. And, you know, if Dr. Toomey wants to, she can come answer that question as well.
Could I ask Dr. Toomey? Could I ask her about the numbers? Thank you. Dr. Toomey, thank you so much.
I'm Kathleen Toomey, Commissioner of Public Health here. I mean, we've been monitoring these data very, very closely. We have not only just been tracking cases, but also actually doing calculating what I call the Birx criteria with respect to Dr. Birx, who I know very well. And we didn't meet the full gating criteria, but we met several of them, and we were approaching a plateauing.
So, Allison, you heard her there mention that the state is approaching a plateauing, as she says. Now, it's important to note that she did say that Governor Kemp used other factors other than data to come to his decision, and she said that she supported the actions that he took. So certainly you can see why there are a number of businesses, people that I've spoken to over the past week or so, some who say that they're excited to get back to work, but others who say that they just don't feel comfortable getting back to normal life. Allison.
Yeah, Blaine, could you tell us a little bit more about what those business owners are sharing with you? I imagine, given some of the conflicting information they're getting, that they may be feeling conflicted as well, as you say.
Yeah, for a lot of people that I've talked to, Allison, it really is a difficult decision. You know, some people are very excited. They're ready to get back to work, and they've taken the precautions as set forth by the governor, specifically those restaurants. They have about 36 requirements that they have to meet in order to be able to open their doors. We're talking about spacing out tables, not seating parties greater than 6 to a single table, temperature checks and masks for employees, things like that. But there are some people who say that, yes, they're opening their doors, but they really are conflicted about it. You know, many businesses here in Georgia have been closed for the past 6 weeks or so. So really financially, they're in dire straits. They talk about the fact that, you know, they still have overhead, they still have rent, they still have a lot of bills that don't stop just because the pandemic does. So I've spoken with a couple of business owners who say they really weren't happy to open their doors, but financially they felt they didn't have any other choice. And then, Allison, we have a third group of people who just say, yes, things are difficult. They want to get back to work, but they just don't feel comfortable doing it yet. Allison.
Blaine, what about customers? You've been out there visiting these local businesses, getting a sense of what's going on. Are people starting to go back?
They are, but it's somewhat of a slow trickle, at least some of the places that we've seen. Now, I will say that when we were out yesterday, we went to a couple of breakfast places and we saw a small number of customers, eager but small group. Well, as we were out today, we actually saw more people out and about, more people kind of dining outside at some of these cafes near where we were on the Marietta Square. We saw a number of people who were out taking walks. So, you know, of the owners that I've spoken to, the business owners, they say that what they're anticipating, at least for the first few days, is almost calling this a soft launch, saying that they're going to kind of grease the wheels, get back into the groove, expecting hopefully that the number of customers will increase as the weeks go by. Allison.
All right, Blaine Alexander in Georgia, thank you so much.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.